the Tuesday, January 4th, 2022 RTD Special Board Meeting. The record will reflect that we are convened as of 5:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I would respectfully ask everyone to remain muted unless you are recognized to speak. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Please note that the official meetings of the RTD Board of Directors are being held remotely in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare. The official meetings of the Board of Directors will be held via Zoom and will be audio and video recorded. The meeting recordings, along with the unofficial minutes of the meetings, will be posted as soon as practicable on the board's website, which is at rtdiqm2.com. A live stream of the meeting will also be available via RTD's YouTube page. I'd like to talk about our civility statement. Colleagues, being elected as members of this body imposes an ethical obligation for each of us to enhance and maintain the public confidence in this agency. As a board of directors, it is our collective duty to the constituents, stakeholders, and staff to conduct our business in an atmosphere of mutual respect, cooperation, civility, trust, and collegiality. These are the values we can all agree upon. As such, I encourage each of us to review the operating guidelines adopted by this board and to act in accordance with those principles, which are available on the Board of Directors page on the RTD website. Thank you. Please note that at the appropriate time during our discussion and voting processes later this evening, I will call on directors in turn. So please know that your time to speak will come. And if possible, please hold your comments until that time. Also, for members of the public, please note that we will not be taking public commentary during this special board meeting. Public comment can be made during regularly scheduled committee and board meetings. For a list of upcoming meeting dates, please visit rtd.iqm2.com. Ms. McManus, can you please do the roll call?
Yes, thank you. Director Bouquet.
Present.
Director Broom.
Present.
Director Busick.
Here.
Director Catlin.
Here.
Director Cook.
Here.
Director Davidson.
Here.
Director Deschel.
Here.
Director Geisinger.
Here.
Director Lewis.
Present.
Director Rosenthal.
Present.
Director Sloan.
Here.
Director Tisdale. Director Whitmore.
Present.
Director Williams.
Good evening, I am here.
Chair Rivera Malpietti.
I am also present.
Let the record show that there are 14 present with Director Tisdale absent.
Thank you.
Madam
For our
Chair,
Yes.
Chair,
Oh, there you
With
are,
respect.
Director Tisdale. Welcome. Please let the
I
record.
apologize.
That's fine. Please let the record note that Director Tisdale is on the line by telephone. Welcome, Director Tisdale. Okay, as a reminder, the Transit Security Administration, also known as the TSA, has extended the federal mask requirement for public transportation until March 18th, 2022. The federal mask requirement states that individuals must wear a face covering while waiting for and while riding public transportation, to include airports and aircraft, train stations and trains, bus stops and buses. This evening, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the devastation this past weekend from the Marshall Fire. I would like to ask our CEO, Deborah Johnson, to speak on the agency's efforts. And then I also would like to ask Directors Geisinger and Davidson to provide brief comments. I would kindly ask that all other directors save any comments that they might have until we reach other matters. General Manager.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good evening to you and all board members and to all that are virtually assembled. As introduced, I am Deborah Johnson, the General Manager and CEO of the Regional Transportation District. As we are all keenly aware, this region is still reeling from the fires that swept across Boulder County last week. The Marshall Fire, which began on Thursday, December 30th, and has since destroyed nearly 1,000 structures and damaged 127 others, and forced tens of thousands of people to quickly evacuate their homes in anticipation of the blaze. Suffice to say, transit services across a large area of the district was disrupted as the fire burned uncontrollably. Thanks to the swift work of staff in the face of this disaster, the agency was able to swiftly pivot operations to provide buses to assist with the evacuation efforts. Transit passes were made available to those affected by the fire. The agency is providing direct service via Flex Ride vehicles to the Boulder County Disaster Assistance Center, located at 1755 South Public Road in Lafayette, and is open 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. to assist affected individuals. Trips can be booked to the Disaster Assistance Center via the RTD website at rtd-denver.com. Tomorrow, Wednesday, January 5th, Route 228 that services Louisville, Superior, and Broomfield will resume service via a detour due to road conditions. The team and I continue to coordinate with Boulder County officials as we recognize the needs are fluid in this changing environment of recovery. There are nearly 50 RTD employees who live in the impacted area. The leadership team and I, in coordination with the Human Resources Division, ATU, and supervisors in the operating divisions, have made contact with all those employees who addresses of record placed their homes in the vicinity, and we found them to be safe. The Employee Assistance Program, also known as EAP, is available for all employees and members of their households, whether directly impacted by the fire or otherwise. EAP provides a myriad of services which are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And all those impacted by the fire are encouraged to visit www.boco.org/Marshall to learn more about the recovery process and available resources for which they may qualify. For those wishing to volunteer or contribute financially or otherwise to ongoing relief efforts, please visit coloradoresponds.org. Though none of us can fully know the impacts of the Marshall Fire on those around us, my team and I stand ready to lean in and assist our colleagues and our community at large. My thoughts are with all of you. That concludes my remarks. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. First Vice Chair Geisinger.
Thank you very much. And I'll start with a big thank you to Deborah Johnson and all of the staff who've been working so hard. I know they worked through the weekend. I think I forwarded an email from Kathleen Brackey, one of our partners with Boulder County, expressing their real appreciation for all the help that RTD has given. Our partners at the counties and at the cities are all working around the clock right now to help people who've been affected. So I want to thank them. You know, my heart just goes out over and over for our neighbors and friends and all the people in Louisville and in Superior. You know, it's just an unbelievable devastation. I'm sure you've all seen it as the fire was racing through, football-sized fields in just seconds. I have friends who watch their homes burn on TV, sometimes repeatedly. And it's just a really sad thing. I'm taken back to the 2013 floods and the King Soopers shooting and all of the things that the community has had to rally from. And many of those are things that are shared through the district. The recent mass shooting in Denver again that happened. My heart goes out there as well. This was a winter fire, and December 30th, it was fed by grasses that, according to the news, had only had 1.5 inches of moisture since June. So I think we can take our role seriously and important in moving people and helping with climate change and hopefully avoiding some of these issues in the future. So the community will rally, Boulder Strong was the hashtag before. It's Louisville Strong, Superior Strong, Boulder County Strong, and people are pulling in and helping out. Thank you very much, Deborah, for all the resources that you just listed, all that you're doing. Another one is there's a wildfire fund that the Boulder Community Foundation has set up, and it's at COMMFound.org. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Davidson.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll keep this brief, but first and foremost, I'd offer my prayers of peace and safety for the two missing people right now and their families at the moment. We're still not out of this yet, and certainly would echo what's already been expressed of my deepest condolences to all those who lost their homes, their businesses, and more in this, including friends and neighbors and colleagues, and to those that I don't know. All I can say is that we're all here for you and grateful to the community for how much everybody around Colorado and the nation, for that matter, are rallying around this. I definitely want to say a thank you to all of the people of RTD, from leadership and across the board, for acting quickly to not only keep our customers safe, our employees safe, and ensuring their safety, but also joining the team in ensuring that the community was safe during the evacuation efforts and ensuring that people did not get into the area. And a huge thank you to all of the first responders and everybody that was involved in the thoughtful plan that prioritized lives over everything else. While my heart goes out to the two people missing and their families, it is absolutely remarkable, particularly having watched this unfold in the distance very, very quickly from where we are, that we're not missing more folks right now. So a huge thank you to the community for the plan that went into that. And finally, I'd be remiss if, just not on a personal note, I didn't thank everybody within RTD and colleagues here and not here for reaching out to not only me, but other RTD employees and all the folks that we work with in the community, and making all kinds of offers of help, of places to stay, and so forth. It's quite the reminder of how resilient and compassionate a community can be. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to comment, and thank you all for being part of this.
Thank you. Okay, our next agenda item, ladies and gentlemen, the election of the 2022 board officers. As stated in the board bylaws, in the first official meeting of the year, the board will elect the officers of the chair, first vice chair, second vice chair, secretary, and treasurer. You have all received a copy of the RTD board officer election procedure rules of engagement for the nomination and election of officers. And in accordance with the board's bylaws and with Robert's Rules of Order, the board's designated parliamentary authority, we will begin with the position of the chair and will work our way through the process for all of the executive committee officers. Those board members who nominate candidates, those seconding nominations, if any, and any other speakers will have up to 3 minutes to speak regarding the candidates for each position. For each office, I will ask for nominations, and when there are no additional nominations, the nomination phase will close and the call will be made for a vote utilizing the electronic voting process. General Counsel Melanie Snyder, in coordination with Directors Cook and Williams as election monitors, will then be asked to tally the votes and to provide the final count either to me or to the presiding officer as appropriate for the announcement. If no candidate for given office receives at least 8 votes, we will repeat the voting process. And if we proceed into additional rounds of voting, board members who wish to speak further on behalf of the candidate by providing new or additional information may do so at that time. This will be done in a round robin fashion. Again, each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes, and I've asked Ms. McManus to be our official counter, so we'll let you know when 3 minutes are up. Are there any objections or questions regarding this process?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Director Burham, please.
maybe we should discuss for a moment ahead of time what happens if we end up with nobody getting 8 votes. Will we then at that point drop a person with the least amount of votes before we revote?
I'm going to ask Ms. Snyder, our general counsel, to talk about this a little bit. General counsel?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Melanie Snyder, General Counsel. So Director Broom, we will proceed. The board bylaws are requiring that there be 8 votes in order for a director to be elected to a position. So we're going to be here until that happens. In the event that there's more than 2 directors that are nominated for a particular position, what happened last year, or what the board decided last year, if there were 2 or more directors nominated and no majority was achieved through that first vote, the directors with the director with the lowest number of votes was dropped for subsequent votes. I think that might be what you're referring to.
Yes, thank you. I just thought it's a lot easier if you decide these things in advance than in the heat of the moment.
Yeah. Thank you, Director Burham. Any other questions or concerns? All right, seeing none, we will move forward with the process as defined. At this time, we will proceed to the nominations for chair of the board. And I would like to take the privilege to nominate the first nominee. I'd like to nominate Vince Busick for board chair. And as you probably know, Vince possesses excellent leadership skills, and I think he's a natural fit for this position. I have had the pleasure of working with Director Busick for the last 2 years in a leadership position and have been able to see him at the ground level working in a regional capacity. But Vince grew up in a transit-dependent family, so he knows the importance this agency plays in the day-to-day lives of our communities who really depend on transit. He has served for many years on the Broomfield City Council, where he helped gather support for fast tracks. He has also served on the executive committee for the last 2 years. He's a member of the DRCOG Regional Transportation Committee, the Northwest Parkway Public Highway Authority Board. He has chaired the General Manager's Oversight and Performance Management Committee, not just this year, but he was very strongly involved last year during the interim general manager. The Colorado Gaming Commission, the Adams County Planning Commission. I know Vince to be someone who genuinely cares about transportation. He doesn't just care about it, he lives it. He thinks regionally, and he considers the issues of equity that solely need our attention. He understands the challenges we face, and I believe his expertise and his integrity will help guide us through these difficult times. He'll be a great leader for RTD as we continue working to bring our riders the best service possible.
Madam Chair, I'll second your nomination. Shelley Cook.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for board chair?
Director Lewis.
Go ahead, Director Lewis, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Historically, individual directors have asked their colleagues to nominate them for positions such as chair and vice chair. However, I've chosen a different path and would like to take the opportunity to nominate myself for chair, for the chair position. I've shown tremendous leadership on this board in efforts to ensure that during our global pandemic, our operators, customers, and frontline staff had the necessary resources to keep them safe and protected during these uncertain times. Excuse me, I'm battling some kind of illness. We need to innovate our customer and constituent processes to ensure that those that are most impacted by our decisions have a voice in the decision-making. Right now, people are not getting the best out of the district. They do not feel like they are getting their money's worth. I want to ensure that that we empower our general manager and her staff to ensure that riders get their value and are valued in this agency, because this board has not, and we have not for a very long time. As a board, our vision needs to prioritize our people over our processes and our policies. Many people, riders, electeds, constituents, really don't know what RTD does and why it does what we do. It is time that we change that and support our general manager in ensuring the success of this agency and thus her success. It's much overdue that we make decisions, that when we make decisions, that we know exactly what that means and how that is going to affect the individual that utilizes our services. I spoke with the rider the other day that asked if we were canceling trips on the A line because we did not have staff to enforce fares, which you all know isn't true, but that is the perception. In my leadership, you can expect an inclusive leader. Not only will I, but I have also demonstrated that I will prioritize equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I will say that what's missing from that lens is the opportunity to ensure belonging is a tenet in which we strive towards on this board. As a Black queer woman on this board, I have both seen and experienced what it means to feel as though you do not belong because your ideologies, values, and experiences are different from those of your counterparts. With that in mind, it is time that RTD begins a new voyage and redirect this agency forward and not backwards. We've been bogged down with conversations pertaining to the completion of Fast Track's program when we should be moving away from professing and into practicing to ensure resiliency and adapt to the needs of our future and our current times. I hear from constituents that they do not believe that RTD is able to meet our future needs because we cannot hire enough operators for our current services, yet we are often focused on rail. We need to reimagine RTD and not stay stuck in the past. We need to focus on maintaining our current infrastructure and our current assets. And leadership, in my leadership, you can expect me to ask two questions. What problem are we trying to solve? And how could I be wrong? In my leadership, you can expect a balanced approach. This does not make the decisions that are best for my district, but decisions that are best for the entire region. And I won't bother to read off my resume nor my accomplishments because you all have access to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for the board chair?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Director Williams.
I believe Director Lewis would need a second.
No, she does not.
I do not.
Yeah, she does not need a second. So, okay. Seeing no other nominations, we will close and go to the vote. So Taishrei, board members will be receiving an email to cast your ballots.
If you could give me one moment to finalize the ballot and I will email it out.
Okay, thank you so much.
Madam Chair, this is General Counsel Melanie Snyder.
Please.
So I see that Taishrei has entered the nominations into the voting system, and I'm going to invite our election monitors, Directors Cook and Williams, to join me in the other Zoom meeting, and we will be back as soon as those votes are tallied. I thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Okay.
Chair Malpietti. I would just like to remind all of the voters they have to hit the submit button.
Okay, can everybody please hit your submit button? And then we should get an email that said that our ballot has been submitted, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I haven't got a ballot yet.
Oh, Director Broom has not received the ballot yet, Tyshree.
Okay, let me see if I can resend that out.
Director Broom, you may also need to check if it went to a different folder in your Outlook. For me, it shows up as other and not in the focused inbox. And that can sometimes also go into spam. So you may want to check other folders or also run a search for Election Buddy.
Oh, I think Director Broom is gone.
We're not ignoring you guys. We're just trying to get the election software to work.
Okay, thank you.
I did reach out to Director Broom to see if he needed assistance, and I did not get through to him.
Okay. Thank you.
Barbara, we're on the phone with him now.
Thank you.
Okay, we should be getting that momentarily. Oh, there's Director Cook, there's General Counsel.
Hi, Madam Chair. This is Melanie Snyder, General Counsel. It looks
Please.
We do have Director Williams and Director Cook back with us. So having conferred with our election monitors, I can confirm that Director Busick has received at least 8 votes and has been elected to the position of chair of the board.
Congratulations, Director Chair-elect Busick.
Thank you.
At this time, we will proceed to nominations for first vice chair. Are there any nominations? Oh, wait a minute.
Yes,
Okay,
Madam Chair.
Director Bouquet, I'm sorry.
I actually saw Director Davidson's hand up first, so
Okay, Director Davidson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Bouquet. I would like to nominate Director Lynn Geisinger for the position of first vice chair. Director Geisinger has now served the RTD Board of Directors as its treasurer for 1 year, as the chair of Communications and Government Relations Committee for 3 years, and as the first vice chair now for 1 year. She has also led and coordinated some of our efforts on SB 151 and represented us diligently on the Accountability Committee, which was a difficult task for much of the past year and beyond. I've had numerous opportunities to work very directly with Director Geisinger during my 1 year here at RTD, and specifically in a capacity that has given me the opportunity to see her clear and strong ability to navigate government relations very well. I've personally witnessed Director Geisinger working hard to prioritize the strength of the agency while gracefully negotiating and listening to various stakeholders and members of the legislature. This, as you all know very well, is not a small task and is often, as you all know, very stressful and thankless, particularly when emotions are very high. Given that we have an expanded focus in the Executive Committee on government relations, I believe that Lynn is a strong fit to continue to serve as first vice chair and continue to serve in a leadership capacity in the next year. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Director Bouquet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to nominate for first vice chair, Director Chantel Lewis. I have greatly appreciated Director Lewis's compassion and empathy for this position. And I think what is even more impressive is, her ability to connect and communicate with not only her constituents, but constituents throughout this district. In my opinion, we are getting on the right track at RTD, but there are going to be a lot of obstacles that we're going to have to overcome. And I think the biggest thing is, how we've been echoing across this agency is listening. And not only listening, but actively listening. And I think Director Lewis has done an excellent job of actively listening to our community through social media, in person, virtually. Again, she's reached out not only to her own constituents, but constituents throughout this, throughout the region. I've been very approached by it. She is not one who will shy away from anyone who has a question. And I think that's what we're going to really need for our RTD board leadership, is someone who is actively listening to the constituents of the region, listening, seeing what their interpretations ultimately are, making those connections. And I think she's going to be an important communication channel on the executive committee. And it would be great to see her there. Again, I think that's going to be kind of our future as an agency. We're not going to be able to do it alone. It's going to come from the public. It's going to come from private partnerships. It's going to come from other governmental partnerships. And of course, partnerships with local community leaders and the community itself. And again, I've been very impressed with how professional Director Lewis has been, including her work as a chair on the Civil Rights Committee. I've also really appreciated working with her on the GMOC. And I believe that she is going to be, that great connection between the public and the RTD board leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for first vice chair? Seeing none, we will close with 2 candidates. And if I could have our general counsel, Director Cook and Director Williams, go to your other screen, and then we'll be getting an email.
Chair, the ballots have been sent.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, just checking with others. I have not received a ballot yet, and I had absolutely no trouble with the first one.
Director Tisdale, I don't know about the others, but I've received the ballot and the confirmation.
Thank you. Yeah, I have not received mine. Monitoring on the computer and phone both.
And for the sake of the record, this is Director Tisdale. The original comment was by Director Whitmore, and I have received my ballot and received a confirmation of its submission. Thank you.
I apologize for misidentifying your voices, Doug and Troy.
I'll take it as a compliment, but I sure would like a ballot.
Director Whitmore, can you check your spam in case it was redirected to a different folder?
I didn't get a second ballot.
It appears mine just arrived, Taishrei. Thank you.
Okay, hi, Madam Chair, it's General Counsel Snyder. So after conferring with our election monitors that I see are back in this meeting with us, I can confirm that Director Geisinger has received at least 8 votes and has been elected to the position of first vice chair. And Madam Chair, you're on mute.
Thank you. Congratulations, first vice chair. At this time, we're going to proceed to nominations for a second vice chair. Are there any nominations for second vice chair?
Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank you for all the work you've done these past 2 years. You know, you led us into and through a pandemic. You led us to select an interim and a permanent general manager, among many, many other things. And that kind of experience is really important as we go into the year 2022. And hopefully as chair of the agency in 2022, I can help lead the agency out of the pandemic. That's, I think, something we'll all be hopeful for. But that said, I think coming into this year, we need somebody that has significant experience, analytical skills, and really understands the agency, transit and transportation overall. That's why I'm going to nominate Director Peggy Catlin for the position of second vice chair. I've worked with Director Catlin on a number of different committees within RTD, from the GMOC to the selection committee for the interim and general managers. I find her to be dedicated, as I indicated, analytical. She's level-headed and is a common sense leader. That is really something we need. And while I don't want to read her resume because we don't have all night, she has some significant experience. We all know that Peggy had a career with the Colorado Department of Transportation. She served as Deputy Executive Director, Acting Executive Director, Interim Chief Financial Officer, Interim Chief Engineer, and was in charge of public and private partnerships. And she's a licensed professional engineer. I find that fascinating. I think Peggy Catlin is the kind of person we need on the executive committee and in the position of second vice chair to help us lead the agency through this upcoming year. And that's my nomination. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for second vice chair?
Director Lewis.
Please, Director Lewis.
I would like to nominate Director Bouquet. I really appreciate Director Bouquet's commitment, compassion, and his thoughtful leadership that he's had on this board thus far. I've been really impressed by his leadership, and quite frankly, his willingness to listen to multiple perspectives, to take into a multitude of information, and to make a decision that's best for the agency, not simply for his district. Director Bouquet has shown himself to be a leader on this board during his very short time. He asks very thoughtful questions. He engages meaningfully with his constituents, and he's always prioritizing the needs of those most marginalized and most vulnerable to ensure that their needs are at the center of all of our decision-making as a board. Furthermore, I believe that his experience as an educator brings both a unique and necessary lens to the RTD board. While he does not have a lot of experience on this board in transit or transportation, I do think that our general manager brings that, and it is an obligation and responsibility as policymakers on this board that I think Julian could bring that leadership and that lens to the RTD board. And so with that, I'd like to enthusiastically nominate Director Bouquet to the board, as I think he would be a wonderful voice onto the executive leadership.
Thank you, Director Lewis. Are there any other comments from other board members for candidates, or are there any other candidates for the second vice chair? All right, seeing none, we have 2 candidates for second vice chair. Ms. Snyder, General Counsel, and Director Cook and Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll be right back with you momentarily.
Thank you.
Chair, the ballots have been sent out. And I spoke to Brady Hunter in IT, and she recommended that everyone click the send and receive button in Outlook to help refresh their email boxes, and hopefully that you can get the ballots quicker.
Okay, I just got mine, so thank you so much. That's pretty fast.
Madam Chair, I have not received a ballot.
Is that you, Director Catlin?
It is.
All right, Ty Shrey?
So I think the ballots are just slow, since it seems a different person has an issue each election. So if you just give it a few minutes, you will receive it in your email box.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Madam Chair. We're back, it looks like.
Please.
Okay, I can confirm that Director Catlin has received at least 8 votes and has been elected to the position of second vice chair.
Congratulations, Second Vice Chair Kaplan. I will now open up the nominations for treasurer. Do I have any nominations for treasurer?
Madam Chair, Shelley Cook.
Please.
I'd like to nominate Troy Whitmore and would preface it with a couple of comments here. As we all know, stakeholder and external relations are a key role for the executive committee with our restructuring. And intergovernmental community relations and connections are just one of Troy's strongest and most notable qualities. Just by way of specifics, he's a public affairs officer with United Power. He's also a former elected local official serving in Thornton, but active now in Brighton. And he's held leadership positions in and has been honored by numerous regional and community boards, almost too numerous to name. He, clearly has credibility with the business community, his local school district, statewide energy and regional economic development groups, and also nonprofits, including serving on the Energy Outreach Colorado Board and also Almost Home, which is a really worthy Adams County agency that serves people experiencing homelessness. So note that not only does Troy have these strong connections in the community and the region, he brings this quite diverse and helpful portfolio of expertise for understanding RTD's impact across the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for treasurer? All right, seeing none, we will close and go for the vote. General Counsel?
And Madam Chair, with just one nomination, it is an option for the board just to proceed by acclamation. So that would be appropriate here.
In acclamation.
Madam Chair, Director Tisdale, I move that we proceed with acclamation of Director Whitmore as our treasurer. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second, Madam Chair.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Acclaim. Aye.
Aye, aye, aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, Treasurer Whitmore. Next, we will have nominations for secretary. Do I have any nominations for secretary? Director Geisinger, please.
Madam Chair, thank you. I wasn't sure if my hand was raising.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I would like to nominate Marjorie Sloan for secretary. Marjorie is, I guess, most well known as the mayor of Golden for 2 terms, where she was a very well respected and considered a very smart leader in her community and Metro-wide. She also chaired Metro Mayors for a year. She was a Colorado representative to Mayors Against Illegal Guns and a committee, Mayors Innovation Project, where she was on the committee with our new Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. And she has worked very closely with many people in the area and the district. Her biggest, I think, transportation victory was working out an agreement with the state and others in the metro area to see that bringing a multi-lane highway through the city of Golden did not make sense. And she won that. But before that, she practiced law with a large law firm and then with the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, and was on a number of other boards, including the Planning Commission in Golden for 2 years. She brings, I think, very wise counsel and good thoughts to the committee and to the board. And I think as a member of the executive committee, she would be a big benefit in working with people, with elected officials and others throughout the district. So thank you. I nominate Marjorie Sloan.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for secretary? Well, seeing none, we have one candidate, Director Sloan. Should we do it as we did the one before? Is everybody in agreement that we just move forward with Director Sloan as secretary?
Madam Chair, I move to have Director Sloan serve as secretary by acclamation.
By acclamation. Yeah.
Second.
Okay. Any opposed? Hearing none, congratulations, Director Sloan, as secretary. So just to recap, what I'd like to do is congratulate the new executive committee for RTD's Board of Directors, Chair Busick, First Vice Chair Geisinger, Second Vice Chair Catlin, Treasurer Whitmore, and Secretary Sloan. Congratulations. It is now my honor to turn over the duties of the chair to the newly elected chair, Director or Chair-elect Busick. But before I do, I would just like to say what an incredible honor it has been for me to serve as your chair for the last 2 years. And I want to thank the community for all the lovely emails I received today and the flowers I received from a very special friend. And it was really an amazing part of my journey, but I'm really excited about RTD and how we will be moving forward under the leadership of Chair Busick. So Chair Busick, it's my honor to turn this meeting over to you. Congratulations, sir.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, everybody. Big shoes to fill. So, okay, moving on. Our first item on the agenda is the 2022 bank signature authorization. And the action item is for the Board of Directors to approve the attached bank account signature authorization agreement, the agreement to authorize certain staff members and board officers to sign payments exceeding certain thresholds regarding checks, automated clearinghouse payments, and wire transfers. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
I heard
Go ahead,
Director
Vinny.
Williams as the second.
Okay.
So we've got a motion by Whitmore, a second by Williams. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I believe it was Tisdale.
Was it? I'm sorry. You sound just like Whitmore.
I know that that's the second time tonight.
I mean Williams. It sounds like Williams. So it's Tisdale. I'm sorry. Tisdale is the second. Sorry.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, this is Director Tisdale.
Yes, sir.
It actually was not me. I would be happy to second, and I would assume that great responsibility
you guys
should you
sound
choose
so much
to confer it
alike.
upon me.
Okay.
It was me, Whitmore, but thank you, Doug.
So I have Whitmore as the motion maker and Kate Williams as the second, and that's it. That's what I heard. Is there any discussion on the matter?
No.
Director Lewis.
Director Lewis.
This is more specifically for our general manager in the past. I know this is simply for signatory, but one of the issues that I've raised in the past, actually for the past 3 years, and this would be the fourth, is that we are continuing to bank with Wells Fargo. And I think directors such as Director Cook has actually done the research to see that Wells Fargo has some predatory practices. And so, I would just encourage us to think about what that means for us and how we continue to work with folks who prey on and harm our most marginalized citizens in our community and our most vulnerable citizens in our community. And so I'd hope that we might consider a change in banking with Wells Fargo. In the past, our chief financial officer has shared with us that Wells Fargo, that we actually don't hold a lot of money in the Wells Fargo account. Director, I think, Tisdale, you might not be on mute, that we actually don't hold a lot of money in our Wells Fargo account. And so I hope that we might just consider not banking with RTD as we are moving into a future that is really prioritizing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lewis. I see Director Cook has her hand raised.
Yeah, well, acknowledging the concerns and knowing that these have been brought up in the past and not discounting them. I don't think it was me that did the research. I didn't want to take credit for that and just wanted to set the record straight. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Director Cook. General Manager and CEO Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and congratulations to you on your appointment. And thank you very much, Director Lewis, for broaching that topic. I hear you and I understand your concerns, and I'm empathetic to those concerns. And what I would suggest holistically, this would be part and parcel of the board to put forward a policy as we embrace collectively as an organization, diversity, inclusion, belonging, and then equity as well as we go forward. So thank you very much for bringing that to my attention. I was unaware, as I had not heard that in this forum, but do know from previous interactions with different agencies that past boards of which I've worked for have broached similar issues, and it would be incumbent upon this policy body to act upon that, and we as staff would, follow suit accordingly. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, General Manager.
Thank you, GM CEO Johnson. Director Deschel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Want to second or third the statements that are made regarding Wells Fargo. I formerly worked in Baltimore City Public Schools, where a number of individuals were also severely impacted by Wells Fargo's predatory practices. If there's any way we can find, happy to work with anyone on putting together that policy, or maybe it's part of our fiscal policy, but it doesn't need to be today, but offline would really appreciate sort of understanding the mechanics and what the cost, so that we approach this in a way so we understand what the cost would be to the agency, along with the timeline for being able to exit one bank and enter a new one, knowing that there's a certain number of requirements for banks that hold public funds, and that each large public bank, including JP Morgan Chase, have their issues. JP Morgan Chase's is more on the environmental side, but curious to know what our menu of options might be as well.
Thank you, Director Deschel. Any further comments, any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. I'll take the roll. Director Bouquet?
Yes.
Director Broom?
Yes.
Busick is a yes. Director Catlin?
Yes.
Director Cook?
Yes.
Director Davidson?
Yes.
Okay. Director Deschel?
Yes.
Director Geisinger?
Yes.
Director Lewis?
Yes.
Director, I guess it's Director Director Rivera Malpiedi?
Yes.
Director Rosenthal?
Yes.
Secretary Sloan?
Yes.
Director Tisdale?
Yes.
Treasurer Whitmore?
Yes.
And Director Williams?
Yes.
And it passes 15-0. We'll move on to our next action item, which is the 2022 official meeting notice posting location. And the item before the board is for the Board of Directors to designate the board meeting portal on the RTD public website, http://rtd-iq.iqm2.com, as its official location for posting of notices of all public meetings in 2022, as required by section 24-6-402, paren 2, paren C, paren Roman 3, Colorado Revised Statutes. Do I have a motion?
Tisdale, so moved.
Tisdale.
Second.
Second, Rivera Malpiedi. And is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing no discussion, I'm just going to ask if there's anybody opposed to this motion. Hearing none, the motion passes 15-0. Let's move on to our third action item, which is the 2022 redistricting public outreach plan. For consideration is for the Board of Directors to adopt the 2022 redistricting outreach plan in accordance with the recommendation by Chair Rivera Malpietti and Directors Broom and Sloan. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Rivera Malpietti.
Second, Catlin.
And is there any discussion of this? Seeing none, are there any?
Director Lewis?
I'm sorry, Director Lewis, go ahead.
Thank you. I would just like to state for the record, so as you all might recall, when it comes to the redistricting conversation, I've been very vocal and insistent in some ways about ensuring that we are engaging the public in this process in a real and meaningful way, and put forward an amendment to the process as it currently is or existed prior to that amendment to ensure that the public had a voice in this process. And I just wanted to say for staff, just for the sake of clarity, that my intention, and also Director Deschel can speak for himself, was not for the board to, or for staff or board members to come back with a board initiated action item to have us vote on, but to have staff present that back to us, what the plan was, including dates. And so I will just state for the record that this is actually an unnecessary step one, but also I would state for the record that oftentimes I don't think board members are aware of when you unintentionally erase the work of Black women, i.e. Chantel Lewis in this regard, by not asking or inquiring with me about as to whether what my intention was when I brought forward the amendment to bring in additional engagement for our constituents. And so I would just encourage folks to be mindful of that you sometimes can erase individuals' works by not asking questions or reaching out to them when you might have an inquiry, or you might be unclear of what the intentions was of that individual. Myself, because this was not necessary to be voted on. I just wanted to know that the dates were scheduled. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lewis. Is there any further discussion on this? Seeing no further discussion, are there any no votes on this action item? Seeing none, that matter passes 15-0. Next, we have the approval of the board meeting minutes for November 16, 2021, the board meeting minutes, December 2nd, 2021, the GM Oversight Performance Management Committee meeting minutes, and the December 7, 2021 special board meeting minutes. May I have a motion to approve these minutes?
Director Williams, so
Approval,
moved.
Broom.
I got Williams as the movement and Broom as the second. Is there any discussion on the approval of the minutes? Seeing none, are there any no votes on approval of the minutes? And seeing none, that motion passes 15-0 unanimously. And next is a discussion item on the internal audit improvement plan. GM CEO Johnson, I'm going to turn this over to you to have the staff and whoever present. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Once again, I'm Deborah Johnson, the General Manager and CEO. I am here before you to introduce the Internal Audit Function Improvement Plan discussion item. Prior to introducing Ruben Brown, the audit consultancy selected to perform this critical work, it is important to provide context as to how this work came to be. As you recall, in December 2020, and then subsequently in April of 2021, RTD's internal audit function was subject to review by the Office of the State Auditor, and then thereafter, a peer review panel that I requested of the American Public Transportation Association, commonly referred to as APTA. The performance audit performed by the Office of the State Auditor and the APTA peer review both resulted in overarching findings and recommendations regarding the operation of the internal audit function and the board's audit committee. Following the reviews, it was collectively agreed by this board that a third-party subject matter expert in the field of auditing be retained to aid the agency with improvements for its internal audit function, chiefly to align the internal audit function with recognized audit standards and practices of the Institute of Internal Auditors International Professional Practice Framework specifically the Global Public Sector Insight, independent audit committees and public sector organizations, ensure the efficacy of the internal audit function according to auditing best practices, and implement recommendations from the state audit and the APTA peer review. Momentarily, Ruben Brown will present recommendations regarding the optimal structure for RTD with respect to internal audit committee best practices and recommendations, enterprise risk management processes and conclusions, and the audit process and customary timeframe. Our Chief Financial Officer, Doug McLeod, along with our Executive Business Partner, John McKay, as well as I, have supported the Chair and the Vice Chair of the Finance Administration and Audit Committee since July of 2021 in an administrative capacity, and will continue to do so as the agency seeks to retain professional auditing services to effectuate best practices for independent audit functions in public sector organizations. So before I introduce Ruben Brown, I would now yield the floor to Finance Chair Peggy Catlin.
Thank you, General Manager and CEO Johnson. You know, as Chair and Vice Chair of this committee, Director Davidson and I have had a chance to preview the Ruben Brown presentation that you will see in a moment. We would like to emphasize that this is a starting point, and the board will make the ultimate decision. We know there will be many questions. I would ask, therefore, that we consider asking the new board chair to appoint an ad hoc committee to flesh out the details of the new audit committee and governance at the Thursday executive committee meeting. After Ruben Brown's presentation, I would like to add a few comments outlining a proposed ad hoc committee scope of work and charge. And as a person who has been really advocating for a deep dive look into our internal audit division since I got on the board in March of 2018, I am so pleased to say that with General Manager, CEO Johnson and staff's support and leadership, we are finally at a place where we can move forward deliberately. So thank you very much. And I would ask my Vice Chair, Director Davidson, if he wants to add anything to my remarks.
Thank you, Chair Catlin. I'll keep it just very brief. I just would echo the sentiments. First of all, Director Catlin, thank you for your leadership. Our second Vice Chair, Catlin, thank you for your leadership on this. And thank you very much to staff, including CEO and General Manager Johnson and Doug McLeod, for leadership and helping us shepherd this through. I think it just would emphasize the importance for us to make steady and swift progress here. And just would echo your recommendation to the executive committee and to Chair Busick to consider forming an ad hoc committee. I think as we'll see, there are a lot more questions than answers at this point, but I would just say we are making progress. We're getting into this and we need to continue the work, and it's time that the board get more actively involved through the formation of an ad hoc committee. Particularly, just I would remind with the timing that the Finance Administration and Audit Committee is now being changed, and we need to begin the work to put our audit committee together, which I think can come out of the work product of the ad hoc committee. So thank you. You yield the floor.
Thank you very much. If I may at this juncture, turn the floor over to Beth Wormsley, who is with Ruben Brown and her colleague Dave I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, Harelnick, to lead the presentation.
Thank you, General Manager Johnson. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing us to come and present some recommendations to the board, to the RTD board. I will share the presentation. So if anybody has difficulty seeing it, please let me know. I'm going to skip through a few slides. We did talk already about the background and the fact that we were engaged to do this internal audit project as a follow-on and an initial step to the findings from the Colorado Office of the State Auditor and the American Public Transportation Association, or APTA. And specifically, the objectives of this review were the review of those reports, the APTA report, and through that, coming up with an optimal internal audit or recommended optimal internal audit structure or recommended audit committee structure. We also reviewed the internal audit charter. That is one step that has been completed by RTD. They have redone their charter as of last July. So we compared that to the Institute of Internal Auditors model charter, and it does align with the charter. And we actually compared it to peer comparisons as well. And I would say RTD's is stronger and more aligned than even the peer comparisons that we've done now that it is aligned with the IIA or Institute of Internal Auditors recommendations. The other thing that we did through this process is developing an enterprise risk management process for RTD and went through the initial assessment with RTD's management. We did peer comparisons and then finally some internal audit reporting templates, recommendations and things of that nature provided to management. So with that, I am going to move on to the optimal internal audit structure. We looked to sources primarily. The IIA is the main, the Institute of Internal Auditors is the primary governing body for internal audit organizations, but we also considered peers and what other organizations are doing, as well as other government organizations, clients that we have, the benchmarking, and of course the APTA recommendations as well. We also spent a lot of time with management, RTD's management, discussing what really are the needs, what is going to be the best model, what will help you based on where your risks are, how are you going to be able to manage those best. And through all of those discussions, we feel that the optimal internal audit structure is an outsourced function so that you have access to the specific subject matter experts that you need for the key risks that you are facing at the current time, and that you can continue to stay on top of those key risks. In looking at that, we took a look at the National Association of Corporate Directors to see what the best practice structure is, along with our own experience with outsourced departments and what we typically see with clients. This is a traditional structure where an internal audit function does report to your audit committee, as well as your general manager and CEO. And then in an outsourced function, there's typically a liaison to just make sure that things are running smoothly and information is being passed back and forth between the two organizations appropriately. So this all comes from NACD experience with other organizations, and then of course the Institute of Internal Auditors, which we always rely heavily on. With that, I will move on to the optimal audit committee structure. And again, some of these same best practices coming from the same organizations, the Global Public Sector Insight Independent Audit Committees in Public Sector Organizations, which again is through the IIA. We also pulled the benchmarking report. The Institute of Internal Auditors does a benchmark review every year. And so we used a lot of information from that as well. And then NACD as well. So some of the key things, I would say the key takeaways from this is that audit committee members need to be independent to perform their job appropriately, as well as having the right skill sets. So when we talk about independence, we define independence as somebody who is not employed by RTD, does not provide any services to RTD, and that the only duties they have are specific to their audit committee responsibilities for the organization. So that's what a truly independent audit committee member is. Having the right skill sets, and we'll get into this in the next slide, but the typical ones that we see within public sectors are going to be, and any organization, but we specifically benchmark to public sector, financial and business acumen, understanding internal controls and governance, as well as industry experience. And we generally see clients will have a mixture of that throughout all the different members. So you may have one that is very strong in finance and has that financial business acumen, and then another audit committee member that is very strong in industry or operations, and maybe a third that's very strong in internal controls, understanding risks like cybersecurity and things of that nature. So the next slide gives you a benchmark to really show you what public sectors in the 2021 Institute of Internal Auditors survey, where the majority of the expertise lies. And you can see that financial is very high in industry specific knowledge, And then right behind that is business management, as we spoke about. And then, of course, internal and external audit and operational experience. So that's where we generally see, that's where the IIA sees it. And I will say that in our experience with clients and my previous experience, even as being a chief audit executive for an organization, was very similar to this. I'd say our audit committee also was very financial, business management, and operational with some industry experience. So, and some audit experience as well. We had a CFO that was previously a partner in an external audit firm. Moving on to the next one. This is to discuss the meetings and the best way to approach meetings. Right now, in 2021, there were 10 meetings last year and only 5 had the audit committee agenda on it, which is in line with the benchmarked organizations for public sector, which was an average of 5 meetings a year. But what we're recommending is to do more specifically what we see traditionally with organizations, where there's a separate official audit committee meeting that takes place 4 to 5 times a year. And the audit committee chair then provides a report to the full board of directors at the very next full board meeting on what is discussed and more of an executive summary about the audit committee meeting. I won't go through all the details on this slide, as I understand it's already been provided in your packet. But we did just want to make sure that you had the information as to what the key recommendations are for the 3 to 5 members and the composition. With that, I am going to turn over to my colleague Dave to speak about the enterprise risk management process that we went through with RTD's management team.
Thanks, Beth. Ruben Brown performed a full enterprise risk assessment with the purpose of identifying potential risks and risk events, and for management to prioritize and manage those events. Ruben Brown first conducted interviews with 12 members of RTD senior management and management to identify those key risks. We then identified a full enterprise risk universe where 18 risks were identified to be surveyed by RTD management. The 37 employees that participated provided a great deal of insight and allowed Ruben Brown to then categorize and put the top 5 risks in a heat map that you'll see in the following page. Actually, the heat map 2 pages forward, but on the next slide, we'll discuss the top 5 risks that were identified and the overall risk score. So you will note that a lot of the risks are pretty common to that other organizations are seeing, and then there are some that are industry specific to RTD, and we could also expect to see future updates to these as it is a best practice to identify or reperform a risk assessment and because over time risks will rise and fall with the economy, management's mitigation efforts, and the like. So it also in the future should be updates as to how those mitigation activities are progressing, because and management may even elect to just accept some of the risks that really can't be reduced without severe efforts. I think the following slide is the heat map that is used to depict the top 5 risks and where they stand in terms of severity, probability, and then the colors identify the risk preparedness. The probability of, and I guess I should also note that this is the perceived risk preparedness. So the surveys pointed out what management, how they felt about them, obviously could be skewed within certain people's areas, but we did select or survey a wide range of management's employees to get a good idea of all that. It's interesting to note that the high risks all have some level of management preparedness, which is great. But then we also would note that it is important for internal audit, and this is also one of the main purposes of performing this risk assessment, for internal audit to validate the risk assessment results and management preparedness in the future. With that, I'll turn it back to Beth.
Sorry. I'd just like to give a little bit of information as far as what these ratings mean, since my understanding is enterprise risk management is new to RTD. So I wanted to provide a little bit more information. Severity, when looking at the severity of a potential risk event, and we define this in the survey so that it helps reduce some of that judgment that may come into taking a survey. So there's both quantitative and qualitative factors that go into looking at what the severity and the probability is. But when we talk about severity, it's if the risk event occurs. So we're not saying that this has already occurred. In some cases, it's something that just could occur. And in some cases, it's things that RTD is already facing. But the severity is how severe will those consequences be, given the controls and the processes that are in place to mitigate. And then the probability is really that likelihood. How likely is it that this risk event is going to take place? And then that overall rating that you saw, let me switch back to this. This overall score is based on your probability times the severity to get an overall risk ranking. And then lastly, the risk preparedness. Also, we give management a scale before they take the survey so that they have an understanding of, are we unprepared, are we slightly prepared, and give them a little bit of definition around that. That's really to say, assess what your current processes are and what you know that you have in place. And if this risk event does take place, how prepared are you as an organization to deal with that risk event? So, Dave, did you have anything else to add?
Nope, thanks, Beth.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'd like to move on to the audit reporting and really specifically the audit process. So the first three items that you see on this slide, the audit planning, the field work, and the reporting, that's a standard process for any internal audit. That is the initial internal audit process that is performed. So you plan, you identify those objectives, you go through the field work, and then give the initial reporting to management and then to the audit committee. And that initial reporting has management remediation plans for any deficiencies that are deemed important enough to have a remediation plan in place. The follow-up piece is typically done semi-annually or annually, and that is another reporting to the management team and then also to your audit committee specifically to say whether the action items that management said that they were going to implement to remediate the issues identified during the initial audit have been completed or not, and are they on target? So sometimes you may see an item, especially if it's a longer term item like a system implementation that needs to take place. You will sometimes see those stay on the follow-up a little bit longer. I've even seen them go beyond annually. But then if there are things that are very critical and high risk, you may want to have those more frequently and have more frequent communication with the audit committee, even outside of a standard audit committee meeting, just to give updates and status on where those are at so that high risk items are being taken care of and accountability up front. So the semi-annually or annually is for your more traditional internal audit, but as I said, you might have some that you're going to want to follow up on more frequently. So this is just the standard audit process. Certainly deeper dive audits take a little more time. And then if your process or what you're looking at is more of a process level or a very specific objective that you're taking a look at in that specific audit, it may not take as long as shown here. This is just an average for you to get a feel and an understanding for that audit process. Now, before diving into the audits, the main thing is to develop what that internal audit plan is. And one of the key takeaways that I think is very important for audit committees to understand is that the audit plan should be developed based on your enterprise risk management. So you're focusing all resources, including your internal audit resources, on those areas that are highest and most key risks for the organization. So you build it primarily based around your ERM and the results there, and then remaining flexible throughout the year. While you're building a one-year audit plan, Remaining flexible is key to accommodate emerging and new business risks. As we know, these things can pop up at any point. I would say probably 2 years ago in January, not many people were thinking about COVID and what remote workforce was going to look like, and everybody had to pivot very quickly. And many internal audit departments pivoted along with that to say, okay, what are our key risks now that we've gone remote? And they did make several changes to the internal audit plans, and we recommended many of them for the clients that we work for to make sure that those high risks are being evaluated and reviewed. So it is important to remain flexible, and we recommend that on the quarterly, every 4 or 5 meetings, that is a discussion topic with the audit committee to say, we need to make an adjustment to the audit plan because of this emerging risk, or we're on track and we're going to keep the audit plan as is. There are no current emerging risks, but I feel that that's very important to always consider in the audit process for an audit committee. For the next steps, as we talked about, this is just the initial start for RTD. RTD is going to be soliciting proposals for an outsourced internal audit department, establish the audit committee, and then develop that risk-based internal audit plan. And since we have completed the ERM and turned that to RTD's management, and then we provided some ideas for internal audits as well. But that would have to come through whoever you select as your outsourced internal audit provider and your established audit committee. So with that, I'd like to yield the floor to General Manager Johnson.
Thank you very much. And with that, that concludes our presentation, Mr. Chair. So turn the floor to you. In fact, if there's questions, and coordinate through Finance Chair Catlin.
Actually, I did have a few follow-up points to make, if I might, Mr. Chair.
Yep, go right ahead.
Okay, first I want to thank Reuben Brown for their excellent work in completing the scope with which they've been charged. And I think we need to keep that in mind. But, you know, as you can see, this recommendation is a departure from previous internal audit practice at this agency. And I'm sure there are many questions of which there are not yet answers. I have several myself, and that's why we are suggesting, Director Davidson and I are suggesting an ad hoc committee be formed to address the following. One, the audit committee charter, not the internal audit charter, but the audit committee charter, audit committee responsibilities, audit committee composition, and how to determine who and what committee members should be on there to ensure some independence, capability requirements of the chair of the audit committee and members of the audit committee. Those would include personal attributes, expertise, and skills. This board's process of appointing audit committee members, and then a process for assessing audit committee performance. So the reference document, the independent audit committees in public sector organizations that CEO GM Johnson, as well as the Reuben Brown representatives, used as a reference. This is really a guide that refers back to the AIA standards, but it also provides tools and templates for evaluating key components. I read through the document in its entirety as I had some questions, and it was very helpful for me. And I suggest that this kind of be used as a workbook or a guideline for any ad hoc committee that may be formed to develop some of the documents that I just listed. And it's important to note that if we do hire an outside or consultant for audit, that they be brought into this discussion as well, because they bring the expertise. So with that, Mr. Chair, that's the extent of my comments tonight. And I do look forward to moving this change in our internal audit function forward to improve RTD and its accountability to the public. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Director Catlin, and thank you and Director Davidson for your work on this today. And I thank the Reuben Brown team for the presentation and their work as well. We're going to go into discussion now, and I see Director Deschel has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Reuben Brown team, along with Director Catlin, Director Davidson, for your guys' work. Audit is really critical. I'm curious for anyone from the Reuben Brown team, if we have anything showing, I know we saw the composition, the typical composition backgrounds that individuals have. I'm wondering if we have that shown over time, just because my gut is that we may be seeing more of a shift towards people with that IT cybersecurity strength as that becomes more of an integral part of our daily lives. Does that change year over year? Is there any data out there that shows those changes year over year?
If you were to pull the benchmark reports year over year, you would see some shifts. I would say that they're very slow.
Okay.
In the shift, and audit committee is typically very focused on finance, but what I am seeing myself within my clients is a lot of CFO type person or external audit partners that have that IT experience coming on to audit committees, because to your point, cybersecurity being so important. So we are seeing a lot of that. And the benefit of getting someone like a CFO that has been in charge of not just the finance side, but the IT side within their own organization where they're employed, they bring both of that experience and that level of knowledge in one person.
Awesome. Thanks. That's really helpful.
Yes.
Thanks, Director Deschel. Director Cook, you're next. You're on mute, Director Cook.
I got to rehearse all that. So I just wanted to add thanks to the consultants, but also to Directors Catlin and Davidson for the work that went into this, and working closely with the consultant and GM CEO, Deborah Johnson, and others. I'm glad for the chance to explore further some of those through the ad hoc committee. I assume us board members will be able to forward our questions about the process. But since we've got Reuben Brown, I had a couple that I wanted to put to them. I was looking back at the peer review presentation a few months ago, and one thing their findings about the agency and its prior practices included this statement about the risk assessment. And it said, audits are mainly identified through interviews with management, which is only one of the many sources for the audit plan. And I seem to recall sort of a universe of factors that needed to be taken into account. Did you just base your risk assessment and the identification of those areas of concern on these interviews, or did you have other things that you folded in as well?
So when we prepare for the interviews in that process of gearing up to have meetings with management, we do research ahead of time on industry specific risks and bring those ideas to those meetings and have those discussions with management. But a lot of what they're referring to is the actual audit plan itself. So you perform the enterprise risk management process, and that's identifying all those key risks, whether they're operational, financial, compliance, all of that. And there was a much larger universe than what you're seeing in this presentation. We try to focus just on the top 5 because there are only so many resources that can be focused on any one thing at any one time. So you always want to hit those key top risks. But my understanding of what they were talking about in that report is not just relying on your enterprise risk management to develop that internal audit plan, but other factors such as industry, management requests or board requests often go into developing your internal audit plan. And that is a next step. That is one of the items that would come from whichever firm you select for your outsourced provider. They would go through that process of pulling in those ERM results as well as industry specific and RTD specific. So there would be conversations around that as well in developing what that internal audit plan should look like.
Okay.
So the Institute of Internal Auditors will tell you to start best practices to start with ERM and then consider those other items. Does that answer your question?
Oh, I think partially. Mr. Chair, can I continue here a bit?
Yes, go ahead, Director Cook.
Okay. So you have conducted the enterprise-wide risk assessment, and so the template includes these interviews and maybe some industry-specific knowledge. But then the next step in terms of refining that internal audit plan based upon the priorities identified through the ERA, but also includes some other factors, is what you're saying? And that's in the next stage, okay. As I understand it, and from your presentation, it sounds like you mean for this, these risk factors and the ERA to inform not just your recommendations regarding the structure of our internal audit function, but also the likely internal audit plan that we'd have. Do you therefore see as, you know, item number 1 on our plan, a look at the board's governance? And would the outcome of that be recommendations to the legislature about how it might change? Or, I mean, I'm just trying to get a handle on where this leads us.
That's a great question. So what we do when we're the provider, when we're providing outsourced services to a client or even co-sourced services to a client, we take that enterprise risk assessment, the results. So you go through the interview process, which is with a smaller subset of management. Then you go through the survey process, which we also did, which is a larger group of management, and identify getting from 18 to 20 key risks and getting it down to those top 5. Then what we do as far as developing the internal audit plan, that very next step, is looking at what those risks are, not just the top 5, but all 18 as well, to say which ones are already being mitigated in another area or being looked at. So let's say you have another firm that's coming in that's specialized in transportation. If safety were maybe, if it came up high on your risk and that was something that you wanted to consider for your internal audit plan, you would not want to duplicate efforts. So if you already have a safety audit going on that's addressing the key risks that were identified in the enterprise risk management, then that would be something that you would not include in your internal audit plan. Rather note it and say, this organization is already, this consultant is already doing a safety audit here, so we're not going to duplicate those efforts. Rather, we're going to focus the internal audit on an area that is not being covered in another fashion. Does that help answer your question? How you
say since it's been taken up elsewhere, it wouldn't be addressed, even though it's identified as the top risk?
It would be addressed, but it's being addressed through, in the example that I gave, another safety audit group. So my background came from a transportation company. I was a chief audit executive for a transportation company here in Denver. And we would do this enterprise risk process every year, and safety often came up high on the risk assessment. There was a whole group, a whole safety audit group that performed audits and that also used third-party resources that were specialized in that particular mode of transportation. And so we would not want to re-perform an audit that they were already doing, because then you're focusing 2 sets of audit groups or 2 sets of resources on one risk. So what we would do is say, what are the areas that are not being addressed? And let's make sure that we have broader coverage. So it's leveraging all your different groups and other consultants that you may have in, or even internal groups like your own safety group, for example. If they're performing audits and reviews, you wouldn't want to have duplication of efforts, so that you can hit more of your key risks that way.
Okay, I think I got that. One last one, if I may. So the issue of the functional reporting, the suggested change to the bylaws that the UPTA peer review committee had all the personnel decisions regarding the manager of IT and IT audit, including but not limited to hiring, firing, promoting, demoting, and setting salaries, shall be made by the board. But here you've kind of, that's at a remove. So as I understand it, to assure some independence. Given that, how do we address the underlying intent of the functional reporting relationship? What are your recommendations regarding how that's still assured, even though we are outsourcing that piece? How do we know that the board is still, in charge here?
So our recommended structure, the functional reporting of your outsourced firm, would still go to your audit committee.
Mm-hmm.
And then
not those individual decisions, I'm taking it? Or would they be presented for approval? Or I'm just trying to get a sense for how much or little we would be complying with that specific recommendation.
And I think a lot of that is also going to be determined in the next steps. We haven't gone to that level of detail at this point yet. General Manager Johnson, I don't know if you have some additional information you would like to talk about on next steps.
No, thank you very much. And Director Cook, Ms. Wormsley is right on point. As indicated by Finance Chair Catlin, this is the intent of what she was putting forward as an ad hoc committee, because this is outside the scope of what Reuben Brown was retained to do. And the parameters in which was to look at the recommendations that have been put forward by OSA and APTA, hence that's where we are now. So I think these conversations would be better held relative to the ad hoc committee that Director Catlin had made mention of.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Director Cook. Is that it?
Yep.
Great. And Director Geisinger, first vice chair, you're up.
May I suggest that that Director Catlin go ahead if she's got something to add here, in case it answers questions?
Second vice chair Catlin, go ahead.
Thank you. I was just going to add that it's my view that we are taking these recommendations under advisement and then moving forward to flesh some of the details out with what I hope will be an ad hoc committee that is formed. There are a number of ways we can look at that. And Reuben Brown did have a limited scope, and we need to kind of figure out what we need to do going forward. I would also like, personally, with this ad hoc committee, I know I will be asking for the questionnaire or the interview questionnaire and the surveys that you use, not necessarily the results, but just the questions that were asked. Because I think it's important for us to understand the context. I also, I am interested in a little bit greater detail on in your report when we have some time. And I know that we want to protect some of our employees who were who don't want to have their confidentiality breached, and it's a matter of trust. So but I really would, as we move forward with this committee, ad hoc committee, I would really like to delve a little bit deeper into some of the root reasons for some of the concerns and the risks that were brought forward. Thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you, second vice chair Catlin. First vice chair Geisinger, you're up.
Thank you. And I thank you also, second vice chair Catlin. I appreciate you coming in with a next step solution, you and Director Davidson, to move forward with an ad hoc committee, take this under advisement. And I think it's very important, you know, coming out of the state's audit and the accountability committee and the focus on this, that the board is really in control here. And I guess I have one question. You say the committee members should be independent, should be unelected members. You know, I guess I've got just in my first reading of the IIA, I think it's the red book that CEO Johnson sent me this afternoon. It said the committee's composition is also critical. It should include a majority of external members, and you know, it goes on. Am I right that you're concluding the board members should not be on the audit committee?
Point of clarification, Director Geisinger, if I may, I did not send you copies of the red book. I sent you the public sector document. So I just wanted to clarify that there is a difference in the information that you received from me today. Thank you.
Yeah, great. That was my question. Is it your position that the board members should not be on the audit committee?
So the recommendation that we have is to develop, and again, these are just recommendations, and you know, your committee will have to decide and determine how you're going to move forward with this, but that you primarily focus on having individuals that have the right mix and skill sets and that are independent so that you can meet all those other standards. What we generally see then is the audit committee chair reporting to the full board so that the full board is always informed. They know what's going on. They're on top of the governance and understanding what processes and audits are taking place and what are the key risks really, and what does the full board need to be concerned about, and make sure that there's alignment. And General Manager Johnson, I don't know if there's anything else that you would like to add to that.
No, I think it's spot on what you said, just collectively in reference to what has been outlined in the public sector guidance, that generally it's independent relative to decisions that are made in the auspices over which the organization needs to have clear-cut independence.
Right. I guess I see a difference between this public document that you sent me and the position that no board members, it's because this clearly says a majority should be independent. I think, that there's a difference between the chair coming back and reporting to the board and the board really having eyes and ears on what's being said and what's being looked at and all of that. So I guess that's something further to take up with the ad hoc committee. And then I guess just following up a little bit on some of what was asked earlier, the ERA, the risk assessment, you didn't look at any other, you didn't look at the outcome of the accountability committee that spent a year looking at RTD or the state audit or any of those things in making those decisions. Is that right?
So the way the ERM is done is interviews with the key management team to say what are those major risk items that would keep you from meeting your mission and your goals. That's always the starting point for enterprise risk management, really identifying all those key risks and then turning them into risk events that encompass, because one person may say it one way and another person may say it slightly different, but they're pointing to the same key risk. And then there's a survey that goes out to the larger group. So that's the process that we followed. It's a standard. There's a committee of sponsoring organizations that is also used quite a bit in internal audit, and they're considered one of the main governing bodies. And they have a whole ERM framework, and that's where we base our ERM process, is based on that COSO 2013 ERM guidance. So we go through that process of interviewing management, identifying those key risks, keeping in mind what your strategic goals are. So we start out with the strategic plan and that document, and we ask everybody to do that homework ahead of time before we meet with them so that they can look at it and say, what are the key risks that we're really concerned about, that if this risk event happened, we may not meet that strategic plan or that goal. Does that make sense?
Yes and no. It seemed like Director Cook read something that said you would base it on interviews with management and other sources. And I guess where we clearly have other sources, for instance, where the state audit focused on the workforce issues that are two of the issues that are raised here, does the fact that the state audit has focused on those raise those as a higher risk? Seems to me like they might, but you don't consider any of those other any other external information. Is that right?
Well, so in developing what the optimal structure is, we considered the information that was in the APTA report. But as far as the ERM, that's really looking at your strategy and finding that the ERM wasn't based on the internal audit group. It was based on the organization as a whole, finance risk, compliance risk, and operational risk that RTD is facing that could be for meeting your strategic plan. So, and then developing your internal audit plan will take into account, to your point, other factors beyond just ERM. ERM is your primary starting point, but then you're also looking at other factors such as reports, accountability committees. That's really where you dive in and get into that level of detail, and that is a next phase item. Does that make more sense?
Sort of. Yeah, I guess I still see, when if you set these out as the top risks, it would seem to me like we would be wanting to look at that determination from a lot of different angles. But I hear what you're saying. And I think for now, that's all of my questions. Thanks.
Thanks, First Vice Chair. Director Lewis, you're up next.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, Director Geisinger, are you asking for the accountability committee to be involved? Is that the concern, is that there's no involvement of the accountability committee?
No, I'm just saying that if there's, sorry, I don't need to do that. If there is, we're putting together a risk assessment, if there's other information out there that's current, that seems like it's relevant.
Yeah, sure. I just want to I guess what comes up for me is Beth has given the presentation is the focus on the expertise and the lack of, and I mean this respectfully, the lack of transit and transportation expertise on the accountability committee. And so I just want to be mindful of that. But also I akin this to, and I think I might have, and you can tell me, Director Geisinger, if I'm hearing you incorrectly, that there was interest in having more board involvement on this committee, as opposed to having it be independent and independently monitored. And I mean, I find that akin to what the accountability committee was. There weren't board directors on, RT directors specifically, on the accountability committee, and really we were receiving information secondhand from you and Director Whitmore. And so that's kind of what I akin it to, but maybe I might be misunderstanding that.
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
I think this is a very important ongoing committee. Those meetings were all public meetings. Everybody could attend. I don't know what the story on these is, but it seems to me like that there is room in the documents here and the guidelines for having somebody on the committee that is a board member and understands the board and our needs and is part of the conversation. I get it that it sounds like maybe having independent members as a majority. I'm not trying to take away the independence. I'm just I think that it's our responsibility to make this work. I think that having somebody on that committee makes sense.
Beth, thank you, Director Geisinger. Has this come up for you with past agencies? And if so, how have you approached that in the past?
Nope.
No, not you, Lynn. Sorry. Or Director Geisinger. Beth. Sorry, I have a cold, so it's hard maybe to understand me.
So I do not have another current client that has an elected board. They are nominated boards.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Those are the only questions I have.
Thank you, Director Lewis. Director Davidson, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to address Director Geisinger. Good question in the beginning, just about the recommendations around the independent board member. And I just wanted to point out, I think this actually some of this discussion shows one of my initial comments that we have more questions than answers at this point, and also that we're in a little bit of uncharted territory with, I shouldn't say uncharted, but there aren't very many of us that are elected boards, RTD, AC Transit, BART. And so, we have some things to consider with an independent board member. My understanding from the guidelines, the IIA guidelines that we're referencing right now, is that they wouldn't be participating in a number of other committees, a number of other activities. They would be present for their expertise. What's particularly challenging here is that because we're elected, we're brought in not necessarily with expertise that's been selected for audit. So we have I think it's going to take some thinking in terms of how, and Beth, I don't want to speak for you here, but when we spoke about AC Transit before, it sounded like there's not really a good model for us to go follow here. So we have to do, I think, some thinking about how our board retains governance of that audit committee, and yet how we add the concept of having an independent board member, and more specifically an independent audit committee and independent board members on that. So anyway, that's one of those things that I just wanted to kind of remind everybody this is why we think we need that ad hoc committee. We've got quite a bit of research to do. I think we'll take these recommendations under consideration as was referenced earlier. But anyway, I just wanted to take the moment to touch upon that. And also just a comment, since the Red Book did come up, the Red Book, the IIA framework also does have some reference to how this is structured, but it's quite broad, which is the value of having this, the guideline document that's being referenced here. It gets a little bit more specific, but they are just guidelines as opposed to standards. Thank you. So I just wanted to add just a long-winded way of saying that this is kind of what I meant before, that we got as many questions as answers and why we need that ad hoc. Thanks.
Thanks, Director Davidson. Director Deschel, you're next.
Yeah, a lot to chew on, and I go back and forth on the level of independence with the audit committee, right? There are, as people have brought up in the past, recommendations from 2010 state audits that haven't been implemented. And the audit committee historically has been run by the board. It's not to place fault on any one person, but perhaps as we look to the future, it might make more sense to have that, that director who's truly, they just do audit, or, and having that broad majority of people who are independent from the agency. And I mean that both financially, not people who are receiving funds from RTD through grants, but also people who have that expertise. Audit, it's no secret, accountability committee, the state audit, the old state audit, there's a long list of items that need to be implemented. And I think it's clear that perhaps having a majority elected board govern that may not be, we may need to put ourselves aside for the betterment of the agency. Because clearly how and the way in which we've operated in the past with so much director control hasn't worked. And whether we failed as a board to exercise control through the CEO or otherwise, I think we can probably agree that we wouldn't have the long list of recommendations to implement if we were running audit properly for the past however long the RTD board has been in charge of audit.
Thanks, Director Deschel. Is that all your comments?
Yeah, again, it's about, I think, striking that, it's important for striking that balance here.
Great, thanks for your comments. Director Cook.
If I may, thanks. Just a quick clarification. So the findings of the 2010 audit reaffirmed in 2020 wasn't that the board, under the board's control, that audit wasn't being managed properly. It was that the board wasn't engaged in the way that's meant to be, given the usual sort of direct line to the board, dotted line to the GM, CEO, and her staff, that we weren't complying with that practice that is generally accepted as the way to go to assure independence from the operations that are being audited. So I just wanted to clarify, it wasn't that it's gone awry under the board's hands-on direction. It's that the hands-on direction wasn't happening. So just to put that point out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Cook. Director Broom.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out for clarification that we're all outside directors. Unlike a private corporation where you have inside directors and outside directors, the inside directors in a private corporation actually work day to day for the corporation, whereas the outside directors don't. And they're supposed to bring in, an outside fresh view of things. And when we were talking earlier tonight, I think that all got kind of mixed up in trying to figure out what an inside director was and what an outside director was. And I don't think that applies to us because we're a governmental entity. And that's the only thing I wanted to point out. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Broom. Any last comments for discussion on this? Director Deschel again.
Yeah, just for clarity, thank you, Director Cook, for clarifying that point about the state audit as it relates to audit. But I'm also speaking about all of the internal and external audit recommendations that we're still working to implement, right? If we were doing audit at its highest level, we wouldn't have the laundry list that we have. And so I think that's more what I was pointing to, not the fact that the board was not properly managing the audit, the board's management of the audit committee and that specific recommendation, but more just the laundry list of recommendations that we continue to receive that do or don't get implemented, including our incredible backlog of deferred maintenance. So I'm looking forward to continuing to dive in on and putting ourselves aside to look at, okay, what's really going to be best here for our organization.
Thank you, Director Deschel. Director Lewis, lead us out of this discussion.
I will just say ditto to what Director Deschelle has stated. I couldn't agree more, and he stated it perfectly. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for all the comments and all the discussion. Thanks again to Ruben Brown, Second Vice Chair Catlin, Director Davidson, GM, CEO Johnson. We're going to move on to other matters right now. So as Director Revere Malfietti mentioned in the beginning, we're going to start other matters off. If anybody has any comments they'd like to make in relation to the Marshall Fire, we'll take those now.
I did see Director Broom's hand up. Director Broom, did you?
I think he put it down.
Okay.
Well, I'll make a couple. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Director Lewis. I'm sorry. Okay, I'll make just a couple comments. And you know, I live just east of Director Davidson, and he and I communicated on that night, and we were, you know, packed and ready to roll. And it was a tense night, and it was difficult. And we had a friend who was evacuated from Louisville who stayed with us for a couple nights, and fortunately didn't lose her home, but knows several friends and that did. And it's a terrible thing, and we need to just keep these people in our thoughts. Director Lewis.
Are you specifically taking comments about the Marshall fires or other matters just in general?
First, about the Marshall Fire. So there's no further comments about the Marshall Fire. We'll go on to general other matter comments. Anybody else on the Marshall Fire?
I'll put my hand down, just
That's
sending
okay.
my condolences to folks because
Thank
it's
you. Yeah.
tragic.
I don't see any other hands up. Oh, I do. Director Deschelle, are you going to make a comment on the Marshall Fire?
I am. Yeah, it's absolutely sending condolences, and I'm happy that for those of us assembled here are safe, and especially, as Director Davidson mentioned, to those who are still missing. I also want to take the opportunity, growing up in California, where we had wildfires pretty regularly, the importance of having an emergency sort of to-go evac kit. And maybe Director Busick or Davidson can comment on whether they did or didn't, or you know, the importance of really having that go bag ready in case of an emergency, maybe relevant for a safety moment in the future of what to throw in there, how often to update it, things of that nature, because it's incredibly just so sad to see the incredible devastation, and making sure that we all can be as prepared as we can.
Thanks for the comments. Second Vice Chair Catlin, who was actually evacuated the week before. Do you have some comments?
Yeah, I was under evacuation orders and was by myself. And I think Director Deschelle is really, I really appreciate you saying that. I now have my to-go bag ready and, you know, ready to go. And there are an incredible number of things that you don't even think about. One of them being your passport, your birth certificate, some available cash. There are a number of things, and I have it all ready to go if I ever face that again, because it was very, very stressful. And I don't want to diminish anything that happened up in Superior and Louisville, because that was far greater, but it was really traumatic. They weren't letting anyone in, so my husband couldn't get in to help me out, and I was trying to scramble to see what I could get out the door in a very short order. So thankfully that one did not turn out as bad, but I dare say that if we had had the winds a week ago Monday that we had on Thursday, that it would have been a very different story. So my heart goes out to all the people who lost their homes. I personally know 4 families that lost their homes up in Superior and Louisville, and I know that everybody is doing what they can to help those people out, but it's just devastating. And as was pointed out by First Vice Chair Geisinger, this is rather foreboding, and it's something that we need to be mindful of. You usually think it in terms of my neighborhood or the mountain communities, but it's very real in an urban, suburban environment, and that just changes the whole trajectory, I think, for our area. So my condolences and sympathies to everybody, but also the miracle that is only 2 people lost out of tens of thousands of people that were displaced. So thank you for indulging us.
Thanks for those comments, Second Vice Chair Catlin. Anybody else about the Marshall Fire? Seeing none, Director Lewis will take your other matter comments.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to congratulate the Executive Committee on your nominations and your selections, and also provide an opportunity to offer you some words of encouragement as you all journey throughout your new leadership positions, and an observation that many of you all talked about the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I want to point out that the Executive Committee is now all white and all middle-aged folks. And while that is not an indictment on any of you, I do want us to be aware of how that shows up in our leadership, particularly as we're leading an agency and really wanting to ensure that those that are closest to the pain, that those are most vulnerable, that those that are most marginalized are at the center of our decision-making. There has been discussion and concerns about the leadership being very heavy in terms of the representation of the North. And I trust that you all will lead in a way that is global and that prioritizes not just your individual districts, but also prioritizes the agency as a whole. And I hope that as you all are deliberating, you are making considerations in terms of how you all are prioritizing what members to put on which committees, what members who are seen as leaders in your eyes, and how you evaluate that criteria, that you do so in a way that truly does prioritize diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and belonging. And you see that throughout your decisions and in those placements and in your implementation and execution. And so I'd like to offer that to you all as you all journey, recognizing that there's a lack of diversity and diversity within the Executive Committee, but that does not mean that the decisions that you all make will lack diversity in terms of your the decisions that you all make and the decisions that you present and the way in which we lead the agency.
Thanks for those comments, Director Bouquet.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you everyone for your comments. I do want to start off with saying, my heart goes out to those who were affected by the Marshall Fire tragedy. It's horrible to see, but I also wanted to say a thank you to Ms. Johnson for her, actions during this, and working countless hours, and her team, and also all of our RTD employees with the Marshall Fire. I just wanted to start off with that. I also I had a conversation with Ms. Johnson yesterday, but I did want to bring up in a public forum. I have been getting quite a few safety concerns from our Ridgegate station, which is the southernmost light rail station for the E line. These concerns are mainly regarding folks getting off of the E line, either using the Ridgegate station as a temporary shelter. Again, I've heard anecdotally from constituents who have either, been victims of theft recently and witnessing, potential drug use on our vehicles and at our stations. And a few requests that have come up from my constituents are, increasing a presence of security officers at that Ridgegate station, an increase in presence of security officers at the Union station for those specifically boarding the E line, and even as, potentially pausing services to that Ridgegate station. I just wanted to, hear from Ms. Johnson, kind of her thoughts about that.
Mr. Chair, if I
GM
may.
Johnson?
Yes, thank you very kindly. And thank you very much, Director Bouquet, for broaching what we discussed yesterday in this public forum. Recognizing the conversation that ensued, we all know by watching news reports that the whole world is short-staffed. We saw that as we look at cancellations, and we too have been subject to that as well. As I shared with Director Bouquet, and as I said in other forums, being unhoused is not a crime. It is societal issues that have plagued us. And in turn, public transportation is interwoven into the fabric of the communities in which we serve. So recognizing while we have auspices over delivering transit services, there's much needed partnership as it relates to providing varying services as we work with jurisdictions going forward. Recognizing we had that conversation yesterday, I was able to delve a little deeper. And basically what is happening from my understanding, having coordinated with my team that talk to people in the area, basically there are individuals that may be riding the system that are non-destination bound passengers. And in doing that, they get to the end of the line station and they may seek refuge. And it's my understanding they were utilizing 911, and it's causing an undue burden because they're being asked to be transported for services. And so recognizing that this is a problem that's prevalent, what we need to do, and I share with Director Bouquet that I'm more than willing to work with jurisdiction, as you know, we are working currently with the city and county of Denver as we look to mitigate issues in and around Denver Union Station, but that's greater than RTD in and of itself. So I want to say that this is nothing that's fallen upon deaf ears, but recognizing as well that there needs to be a handoff as it relates to services. We do not have healthcare clinicians, social service workers, and other type of personnel on our staff. But what we can do is ensure that announcements are being made on our consus prior to getting to the end of the line station, because basically what's prevalent from what I've learned is that it's really Friday and Saturday nights when the last consus is entering the Ridgegate station around 2:30 in the morning. There's no way for people to get back. And that's where the problem has arisen. So what my team has planned is basically making announcements stating that this is the last train that's going into service because it doesn't turn back. And so that's what we're going to do in the immediate future. But as I shared with Director Bouquet, I am more than willing to lean in and have a discussion with staff at the city of Lone Tree so we can come up with some comprehensive path forward, because we can't enforce our way out of this, because being unhoused is not a crime. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address your concern, Director Bouquet.
If I may, Chair.
Yes, Director Bouquet.
I just want to thank you for providing that information in such a timely process, CEO Johnson, and thank you for letting us know about what the quick term solution is. And I think going forward, we need more clinicians, we need more healthcare workers, and we need to be partnering up with our local jurisdictions, and that's what we talked about, and that's the hope going forward, because this is, like you said, a societal issue, and hopefully we can do our part as an agency. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Director Bouquet. First Vice Chair Geisinger.
Just very briefly, thanks, Director Lewis, for your comments. I think speaking for myself, but I think probably for all of us, we're looking forward to working all together this year and for the good of the agency as a whole, and with you and everyone else. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Geisinger.
Thanks. Any final other matter comments? And just a reminder, Executive Committee meets this Thursday at noon. So Executive Committee members, please be there. And other directors, you are invited and encouraged to attend as well. Moving on, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Deschel.
Deschel, second. Bouquet. And anybody opposed? That passes 15-0. Good night, everybody. Thanks for a great meeting, and we'll look forward to working in 2022. See ya.
Good night.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.